Hello, and welcome to the Professor Podcast with Ruth and Claire. Each episode, we talk about a particular topic in the life of a professor. We are tenure-track faculty members in the sciences, working at a primarily undergraduate university in California. The purpose of our podcast is reflection, so we bring something we think is working and something we're working on to discuss.
Welcome to the Professor Podcast with Ruth and Claire. I'm Ruth.
And I'm Claire. And today we're talking about assigning letter grades. But first, Ruth, how was your week?
My week was really good. I had a situation which is basically this curse of mine that I think I've infected my kids with too, where I'm like very curious and nosy about things.
Okay.
And I also can't tolerate cope with anything scary.
Mm-hmm.
So it's a very push and pull dynamic that goes on in my head all the time. But I think I've talked in here about the Paranormal Physics Society.
Yes.
And I had read a really interesting article about the documentary The Sons of Sam on Netflix.
Okay.
And this student, well, don't look at it, just don't do it. Know yourself and don't be me. But this student was sort of chatting about it on this Discord that we have. And I was like, this sounds fine. Maybe I could handle it. And I watched 20 minutes and then couldn't sleep. So, yeah. It's just, I don't know when that message is going to really sink in. You cannot handle anything about serial killers and please stop doing that. But I'm just so, basically what I want in the whole world with all horror, everything, is for someone to make a PG version so I can find out the story without being completely terrified.
I've totally been halfway through a TV show or something, and I'm like, well, I do want to know how it ends. I just want to read the cliff notes. And, you might be able to find it on Wikipedia or something.
Right, so that's what I need to do instead of tormenting myself.
Just read the summary. Done.
Yeah. So, and it's just funny because my daughter is the exact same, where she's like, that sounds really scary, don't tell me, but do tell me what happens. And I'm like, no, I'm not going to tell you. So she's just, she has the same affliction. Totally.
Understandable.
Yeah. So tell me, how was your week?
My week was good. I've been rereading one of my favorite books by Sincero, You Are a Badass. The subtitle being How to Stop Doubting Your Greatness and Start Living an Awesome Life, which I've definitely referred to a few times on this. But I feel like I'm getting even more out of it the second time through, and I might just keep on reading it just on repeat. Mm-hmm. It's just she's so good at helping me get in the right mindset and helping me actually improve on things I'm working on. Every time I go through, there's something new that I hadn't really thought about or I'm seeing from a different lens, or now I see how it applies to this thing I'm working on. So anyway...
And you're not the same person you were when you read it the first time. So,
Exactly.
Different. Yeah, that's super cool. I'm a big rereader of all books, but I think especially books like that, you can get a whole other message the second time around.
Totally. Yeah, I reread lots of books as well. So my quote is from Sincero, which is, this is the quote. It's the people who make enjoying their lives a priority who actually... enjoy their lives. So just a fun. I think I've already done this quote on here, but I
don't know if you have, but
oh really?
I love it. It's
too.
true because I think so much of especially in the world today with maybe how people consume other people's lives and stuff, but it just feels like these happy, enjoyable lives happen by accident to people, and there isn't this deliberation that must happen in it. So yeah,
totally.
Yeah, I love it.
Yeah, and one of the things that Sincero does, just in her style of writing, is she speaks all casually, but I think is really effective. And so, that was in the quote, a little, who actually enjoy their lives. So she just I don't know. I just really love her effective way of using slang and all that. So I just wanted to throw that out there as well.
I do too. I think, I definitely, when things are in incredibly... I don't even know what the word is. I'm going to say proper speak because that's all I can come up with. It's immediately just this is not for me. This is not speaking to my experience. So yeah. Cool. So tell me, what are we talking about today?
So today we're talking about assigning letter grades, which is the thing that
very
comes
timely
up at the end
topic.
Of each semester. Yeah. And so we've kind of just gone through that. And I was just, it was the day that grades were due and I was chatting with a colleague and we were kind of talking about different ways we think about how to assign the grades, and it was occurring to me that I'd like to do a reflection on it and hear how you're doing it and kind of just think about it a little bit more. So I'm interested to hear whether we're going about it the same way or differently or not. And I don't know if this is the same at all schools, but at our school we get a lot of leeway in how we decide to assign the letter grades. And so, like I put in the syllabus, so I generally start with the normal breakdown of 90 and up is an A, etc. But I don't even think I have to do that if I wanted to adjust somehow. So there's a lot of flexibility that we have as faculty members in choosing how to assign the letter grades. So, yeah. Do you have anything to add?
Yeah, it's interesting when you brought this up because it's something, it can be contentious for sure with students. And it's also something I haven't sort of reevaluated since I started teaching. I was like, threw it on the syllabus the first time and I was like, that's just the facts of the universe. And I'm glad we're having this conversation because I do need to revisit it, I think. And it's also one of those things that, like you said, where I worked before, things were a lot more restricted. So like your class had to come out with a certain GPA average.
Oh, okay. I see.
And here it's a lot more loosey-goosey. But in both cases, I don't feel like I got a lot of solid information about what way to do that or how to make that. Like it sort of is quite left up to you. So I think... Yeah, I don't know. I think I just threw something at the wall and it stuck and then now it's there forever. So I'm excited to talk about it.
Cool.
So do you want to start with what's working for you? And
Sure.
You already said, yeah.
Yeah. So I already said I usually just put up my syllabus. I say something like I start, historically in this class, it has worked out that 90 through 100 is an A, 80 through 90 is a B, etc. But I reserve the right to adjust if needed. I really appreciate having a lot of flexibility in the letter grades system because, I'll kind of get to that in the working on, but it sometimes seems like I'd have to be so perfect at grading to make it all work out exactly the way I planned it on the syllabus at the beginning. So anyway, we'll get to that. But usually it does somehow miraculously work out beautifully, I think, where I do feel like everyone who got a 90 and above should get an A, and 80 through 90 is a B. And so I'm super down with just starting with that structure.
Yeah.
So I always start with that. Usually what happens is I finish and I get all my letter grades for all the students and I sort by, final grade, or I get all my number grades for each student and I sort by number grade in my Excel sheet. And then Ralph and I sit down and Ralph helps me think through and we assign letter grades. And so we just start with the basics, 80 through 83.3 is a B minus, 83.3 up, and then we kind of just look a little more, did anyone really improve on exams over the semester? If so, maybe I'd want to weight the later exams a little higher because they really showed that they did know the material by the end. Something to think about at least. Is anyone really close to getting a slightly higher grade? Then maybe it'd be a judgment call.
I have a controversial question for you.
Yeah.
Have you ever had a situation where two students have the same numerical outcome, but you feel like one maybe would deserve to be bumped up?
Oh, man.
Or the next, or like, I guess maybe you've kind of addressed that in, you could change the weighting of their second test or whatever.
I would definitely want to find a reason to decide to bump one person up and not the other if they were really, really close. The reason, I think, I would feel comfortable with the reason being, wow, this person really showed that they did know it by the end, even if their earlier grades didn't reflect that.
Right.
I would, that could be the reason, or if, I think I would need some reason beyond my sense of it, but maybe if I have a sense of it, that will be reflected in the grade book, Right. And that's kind of what I mean by looking through and seeing. So the other thing I look for is, am I surprised about anyone? Am I like, wow, so-and-so got a B, but I really thought they were going to do better? And usually when I think that, I look back at the grades and I say, oh, well, I thought they were going to do better because they've been rocking the lab reports, but really now that I look, I see they did pretty bad on the exams, and so that does average out, and okay, I'm happy with a B. So I kind of look and see anyone I'm surprised about, which maybe would be what you're saying. If two people are right next to each other, then you go check, why did that happen? And then if that feels right, okay. But if it doesn't feel right, maybe
I've certainly had
students...
students perform super strong in the beginning and then fall apart, and they could end up as the same grade as somebody who started wobbly and then powered through and finished strong, and they don't necessarily deserve the same, so
that's a good point.
It's
Yeah. And maybe this is similar but slightly different to what you're saying. If a couple people are clumped right next to each other, like right at a threshold, like sometimes you have somebody who's like 90.09, and so that's just an A minus, and then you have somebody who's 89.97, and it's just a B plus. But gosh, with the error of my grading, those are the same grade, really. And so I wouldn't feel too bad about bumping the 89.97 person up to an A minus, because really I feel like those two people do deserve the same grade. They earned the same grade. There is error, plus or minuses involved in my grading, and they're so close that they're the same.
Yeah, I think it's sort of weird. Like, you're articulating these things that I don't think I've necessarily thought about. But then when I hear you, I'm like, yeah, like I don't put a line in the middle of a clump. You know what I mean? Like, that's super interesting.
Yeah. So I don't know, just as a little like reiteration, I start with the hard lines, just that are naturally there with the normal grade breakdowns, and then I just see if I feel weird about any of those people. Are there clumps that I don't want to draw a line right through the clump?
Yeah.
And is there any reason to change anything? Like you're saying, like if you feel like this person did much better than that person and they're getting the same grade, then I would look and see if I still feel that way after looking. Usually after I look at the different components, at the homework and the exams and the lab reports, I say, oh, actually they did worse than I thought they did, and I do believe that this is the correct grade after all, So, I don't know. Those are my thoughts.
Love it. Yeah. I actually have similar, like I also put on the syllabus, like if you get between 90 and 100, you'll get some kind of an A or that thing. But I don't have what you said about reserving the right to change as needed. And I really need to put that on there. And we'll get to that later about why. But yeah, I think one of the biggest things people told me, CD, my office mate or office neighbor, told me was to not give people C minuses. And so that has been super helpful, because I think for us to progress into the next physics class, you have to have a C. And so a C minus is just too... I think also they can't repeat it, right, with the C minus, or there's some...
You can.
Thing.
But yeah.
Yeah, so there was something, but it's definitely helped to kind of get rid of some of that ambiguity. So they just there is no C minus, basically.
Because if they get a C minus, then they're so likely to say, oh gosh, but I'm so close to being able to count this as a prereq. But if they get a D or a D plus,
it's just a
then we
clearer
know
cut.
that they're too far away to be. Yeah, that makes sense.
So
that's interesting. The same guy told, in our department, you need a C minus to go to the next class. And that same person told me not to give D pluses. And it's been really nice to just not give the grade where you're almost passing.
Right, because I think I do stretch my C down a little bit, like all the way down to 70 then, so that it doesn't become a thing. And so, I think that's super helpful.
Totally.
I think it's so funny what you're saying, where you look back and you're like, why someone didn't do as well? Because like when I started teaching, I used to get like emails from students that were like, oh my God, I can't believe you've failed me. Like, why would you fail me? And I always would have this moment of like, oh no, like what did I do? What did I mess up? And then you go back and you're like, oh, you got 50% on every single thing you did. Like, it's been a real
isn't fail. Yeah,
you've been super solidly predictable on this. So it's just so weird, because when people are so indignant, I like assume like, oh no, I've done something terrible, and then you're like, actually no, it was fine. You totally deserve that grade. So yeah, I think this isn't relevant to us here. So here we submit our grades, and the students don't see them until a set date when they see everybody's grades all at once. Where I worked before, they saw your grade as soon as you put it in.
Oh, really? Interesting.
Yeah, and so I got some good advice, which was don't put it in until the last possible date, because I would get because I would grade quickly and then put everything in and then have like 50,000 emails about the grade. But when I left it till the end, and someone who failed, this probably isn't true universally, but generally they didn't do great in their other classes. So it's sort of more of an acceptance when everybody's grades go up, instead of earlier in the week, they're still like trying to bargain and stuff.
Gosh.
So that's not advice for us here, because all of ours come out in the same day, but elsewhere.
Interesting.
Yeah. Okay, tell me you're working on.
Okay, yeah. So I kind of mentioned earlier, I feel like, I guess what I'm working on is avoiding grade inflation. And I feel like it hasn't happened in my classes to a point that I'm not comfortable with it, but it's always kind of in the back of my mind it kind of feels like magic that it all works out in the end where I haven't accidentally inflated the grades. It seems like it would be so easy to accidentally grade easily on a couple exams and a couple lab reports and accidentally inflate the grades. So, or what if I made the weight of the homework too high, or the weight of the exams too low, or something, and then at the end suddenly people that I felt like they had not demonstrated A material were in the A category. And it's, I wouldn't want to put people, if they did get a 93, I don't want to give them a B. I would much rather decide, I graded too hard and I'm going to extend the A range down into the 80s.
Yes.
I'd much rather do that if I needed to. So I guess just making sure that ideally I don't need to. And I think normally it does work out, that the people in the 90s really have earned and demonstrated their knowledge and earned an A. But I definitely wouldn't want to be in a position where there were people in the 90s who I didn't feel like had demonstrated A-level work. And so that I feel like that could just happen by accident. So, and just to clarify, I don't grade on a curve. So if everyone does earn an A, that's awesome. It's just if they've earned an A because I didn't grade properly, then that's a problem. So just keeping in mind throughout the semester to grade so that I'm comfortable with the letter grades that turn out in the end is just something I'm keeping in mind.
Dude, you're singing my song. This is my whole issue. And I think, I've kind of skirted with this issue in the past, but the pandemic stuff has really pushed it all the way over the edge. And part of me is like, okay, well, these semesters just get to go down the toilet and there's nothing I can do about it now. But I completely messed up, breaking down the structure of grades, and I really struggle with this because, so what really happened, especially in terms of the pandemic, was I had a lot more credit for things like reading or watching the lecture videos and doing the lecture quizzes, and there's a lot more low-hanging fruit, which I think is important to make sure that people are participating. And I also fundamentally want to reward people for making a consistent effort, which I think is a better study practice than someone who rocks up for the final and aces it, so I definitely want to reward that, but I did not have the percentages correct. And I absolutely ended up with people with A's who should not have had it. People, and not that they shouldn't, I'm judging their character or something, but their examinations,
right,
and just ability, it was not reflected there
based on their demonstrated ability in the physics concepts you taught. They really shouldn't have gotten A's, but based on the math they did.
Exactly. And I think in the grand scheme of things, with the way life has been over the last year, it's fine. I'm not desperately haunted by the fact that maybe they got a grade that didn't totally reflect things. But as a general practice, it's totally not okay, and you have to take care of it. So I definitely need to really do some kind of math or something to figure out carefully how much of my grade is it possible for people to get A's while not understanding basic physics concepts, or even B's, or so they should not do that. And it's funny when we were talking about not doing the C-, because I've given one C- since we came here, and it caused a lot of problems, but it was...
Then you said, okay, no C-.
Right, and I think you might remember the situation, but it was a student who, and this was pre-pandemic, but I had started doing these sort of lab projects, and I had those grades too high. So this student demonstrably did not know any physics, but was sitting right there at 71%. And I was like, oh my, they can't progress, but I don't know if I can give them a D. So it just was this real stress. And they were so mad because I was like, nope, it's a C-, and no, you cannot proceed. You have to retake the class. And they were really, really upset. And it was, in some ways they had a right to be upset because I definitely messed it up, that they were seeing this number grade and thinking it meant one thing. And so, yeah, it was tricky.
Yeah, you don't want to be accidentally deceiving them. At the same time, you're of course right that it would be worse for them to go on when they are not actually prepared for the next level of the class. So, yeah, that's just a toughie.
And I think I liked what you said, where if you have things, I don't know, I definitely don't feel good about, not even a curve, but I've heard of professors sort of bragging if they're test average was 30%, and people are like going into finals thinking they're getting an F and so stressed out, and then at the end they curve it so much that they come out with it. Like, that's just horrible. And I think the stress of that doesn't impact everybody equally. So someone who's confident and knows exactly how university things work might recognize, well, the average of the test was 50%. I'm fine. But someone who doesn't have that kind of context may be so stressed out they drop out or something. So not into that, but I am into maybe tilting it a little downwards and then at the end boosting everybody if needs be.
Yeah.
Because I think that's a celebration.
I agree. I feel like it's important to give the students some feedback and as much as possible about where they're at letter grade wise throughout the semester. But I do agree with erring on the side of grading a little bit harder than you might want to.
Yeah.
Both to give you a little bit of wiggle room, but also I often find that at the end of the semester, my grades do go up. The class average goes up. And usually that's because well, I don't know. It could be lots of things, but I hope it's because they know how the assignments work now and they're better and they are improving. And that's fantastic and exactly what I want, but I don't want to have already been a little bit inflated and then go up. That would be bad. So yes, I think starting, just making sure that we're being accurate and leaving ourselves a little space for wiggle room is good.
Right. And I think there's also, I mean, it seems so varied throughout different just different classes and different disciplines what grades mean, you know, and kind of, I think to me in my head, not reflected in my grade book at the moment, but in my head, if you do everything as you should and sort of the minimum, like not the bare minimum, but the, you know, required stuff for the class, you should get a B. And then if you kind of excel, you get an A. And if you're a little, like, that's sort of how I would think about it. But I think I've definitely encountered students who are very convinced that kind of doing the bare minimum means you should get an A.
Interesting.
Do you know what I mean?
That's
and
so surprising.
Yeah. So I don't know. And I think that can be true in some classes. Not that they did the bare minimum, but maybe it's just it's more, what am I trying to say? What's the difference between like you're just completing tasks rather than like doing exams where you're sort of probably like showing, or even writing essays where you have to have sort of skill set. Like, it's not that, it's more just like you do X, Y, Z and then you.
Well, that's kind of what I'm thinking about with the different sections of the class. Like for homework, I do just grade, did you do it? So if you did it, bare minimum of doing it, you do have a 100% in homework. That's just how I grade homework.
Me too, with like reading and stuff. That's definitely,
And then exams and lab reports and stuff, I try to grade those more like the appropriate letter grades. Like if you did bare minimum acceptable, that should be somewhere in the C range, according to me. If it's failing, if this is not appropriate work for you to be getting through the class and advancing onward, then I think that needs to be below a C in my mind. So that's kind of how I think about it. Yeah. But obviously it varies. And so that's why I think it's really important that we tell the students somehow this is the expectations for letter grades in this class, you know?
Right. And like if I tell you need to do 10 hours a week and you're doing 10 hours a week, then you will probably get a B. You know what I mean? But if you're kind of taking it, so I think maybe that's what I need to do. I need to do a lot of work myself on really feeling confident that I'm measuring what I hope I'm measuring.
Yes. What do you actually want to measure?
Right.
Totally.
And, you know, I think it's probably going to just involve changing weighting of things, but also maybe I could change some of those assignments that I want them to do with regularity. You know, because I do, you know, I was thinking about just having that kid who's like, does nothing and rocks up the end and like blows away the final because they've already taken physics. Like that, who's that person in a research lab? They're useless, you know, or like who's that person in a job setting? Like that's not something that I think is great skill set. You know what I mean? So I really do
demonstrated to you, skills that you could recommend to an employer aside from their physics knowledge. They do have that.
True. But you know, when you get those students who are just like professional business people in the classroom and so organized and so on it, and maybe physics isn't their major but they're just like attack it like it's this job mission thing, and you're just like, you would be a phenomenon in the workplace, you know. So I feel like I definitely want to reflect that in my grading, that those people are rewarded. But anyway, so I need to think about that, and then I think I need to just communicate a bit better with students about what they need to do to get those grades.
Yeah, I think it's all about that. I agree.
And I do think maybe I'm like just assuming everyone is like me, but I think there has been grade inflation during this virtual teaching time. So I think it might require some effort to kind of transition students back from that if they have different expectations. So
that makes sense. Sure.
Yeah. Yep.
Although on the bright side, every time you take a new class, there's different expectations. So
Totally.
So that's good, you know?
Yeah. It's this double-edged sword of academic freedom. I love it in some ways, where we could kind of do what we want, and then sometimes I'm like, just please tell me exactly what to do.
Oh gosh, I don't want anyone to tell me that.
No, you're like the rebel professor. You're like, never. But yeah, cool. Okay, thanks, Claire.
Thank you, Ruth.
Thanks so much for joining us on the Professor Podcast with Ruth and Claire. We're delighted to have you as a listener, and we would love to hear from you. And if you want to email us, our address is contactprofessorpodcast@gmail.com. We'd love to hear any of your suggestions for future shows, or professor quotes that you might want to share with us, or even just things that have come up for you when you were listening to previous episodes. And if you've been enjoying the podcast, we would love if you would spread the word. So the best way to spread word is by telling people you know if you think they should listen to it, or you can leave us a review wherever you listen to your podcasts. Thanks so much for joining us, and we'll see you next time.